Hello, What's on Stage podcast listeners. It is Alex here. As some of you know, the multi-award-winning musical Operation Mincemeat, after being a blast in London, is transferring to Broadway. As such, TheaterMania's editor-in-chief David Gordon has checked in with the original cast of the show who are making their Broadway debuts in the production at the John Golden Theatre. What did they have to say about hitting the Great White Way?
So I guess to start out, can we just go around and you'll introduce yourselves and who you play in the show just for recording purposes?
My name's David. I am one of the writers of the show, and I play Charles Chumley.
My name's Zoe. I'm also one of the writers, and I play Johnny Bevan. And my name's Tash. I'm a writer and performer in it, like these other guys, and I play Ewan Montague.
And I'm Claire Marie Hall, and I play Jean Nesby.
I'm Jak Malone, and I play Hester Leggett.
For a Zoom, I'm very impressed with how orderly you guys did that. It's like you've been doing it forever at this point. Well, I guess to start out, how is New York treating all of you?
Awful. We hate it. And no, it's amazing. It's cold and dry, but apart from that, you guys love theatre and really want it to exist and want it to happen. And it's like infectious enthusiasm that people on the streets, or at least in Midtown, that's how it feels. So we're having a lovely time, to be honest.
We love how silly you guys are. I feel like that, we've done a few previews now. I think we're doing preview 12 tonight and, at a time of recording. And it's been really joyful to kind of put our comedy on a USA stage. We talk about it all the time, just how open and generous the audiences have been and how open they are to just silliness, which obviously is our lifeblood, silliness. So we're dead chuffed about that.
I was going to say the Golden Theatre, I know everything is larger than the Fortune comparatively, but the Golden just seems like the perfect place for this show.
It does. It feels, although the audience is about twice the size of the Fortune in London, which I think we were all quite daunted by at first, but the stage feels actually brilliantly familiar. And the design of the theatre is so nice that actually you do feel like you connect with every single person.
It doesn't feel bigger, does it? In some ways, it feels more intimate than the Fortune, which is kind of crazy, but it really feels like it was made for us. So thanks, the designers and architects of the Golden Theatre. Really good planning from you from some years ago.
When did New York become part of the conversation, and what were you thinking about it? What were you afraid of, and what has it been like so far?
I guess during West End, there was in the background rumblings of what if this goes well, then the next logical step would be to go to Broadway. But that was such a huge jump.
And also it felt like there was those rumblings and then they all went away. I don't know if you guys felt like that. It felt like they're like, oh, it was going well. And then it kind of, the word on the street was it's too British. It's not going to work. And we had some kind of Broadway bigwigs come in fairly early on and it was like, oh, we love the show, it's great, but we're not sure it's going to work. And so we kind of worked under the assumption that it wasn't going to go. And then what was interesting was that we just had more and more American audiences come in, and as a percentage, it just kept weirdly creeping up. And I think honestly, those Americans who came saw it in London, kind of reopened that conversation for us in a way that we weren't expecting, which is so exciting. And we're very grateful for that.
But it wasn't until September that we actually officially were like, yes, this is happening. Yeah. And then it was all guns blazing from that second onwards. So it's been quite a ride.
And there was a lot of chat around that one question, is it too British? Is the human going to translate? Will they care about the story? And I think in all of I don't want to speak for all of us, but I feel like as a five, we felt fairly confident and we felt very protective of the show and what we did in the show and what we'd written. And I don't think there was really a lot of discussion between the five of us, like, oh, wow, we're going to have to change a whole bunch of stuff. We were really firm on being we really think, at least in the first instance, we want to just present our show because we're proud of it and we love it and we want to have faith in it. And that's what we're doing in this sort of preview period.
Well, I guess what have you what have you learned over the course of these 12 previews about the way the show functions for an American audience? Because I don't think it's too British for Broadway. It's I think that question is just sort of a silly thing that Twitter comes up with or whatever. But
I think people are, Broadway audiences, in my experience so far, are so much more willing to be vocal, willing to be present in the space with us as actors. And I think that has gone a long way. I can, by our first couple of previews, a lot of our fans had flown over from London. So we knew that we were in safe hands and we knew what we were in for. And then it was as those fans dwindled away, we were like, oh no, okay, people, even though these loud voices that we know have gone, there's still loud voices in the room. People are still laughing. People are still so engaged. And yeah, after months of hearing these rumblings of Too British for Broadway, it does creep in and you do think, oh no, what will it be like? And then, yeah, those first few shows, it was like, hey, they're here for us, and they're really into it. And it was a revelation, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really feels like that. Like, again, touch wood, like their favorite bits are kind of our favorite bits. Like the really, physical comedy. I feel like we talked about this a lot, but like there's obviously a great tradition of like vaudeville and Laurel and Hardy and like the Marx Brothers in America and we obviously huge fans of all that stuff in a way that I don't know that, traditionally sort of Britain doesn't have that same physical comedy tradition.
I love like entertainment. That kind of
and it feels like the moments in our show that we really try and pay like homage and respect to those traditions of vaudeville and Marx for this type of comedy really seem to pay off, and it really feels like the audience are very much like, yeah, we know this is our history, we really get this and we love it, which is kind of a long way of saying they like hats being passed around by a bunch of idiots. But you know what, so do we. That's what we like.
I think also then the question of like, is it too British? I feel that is somewhat fallen away now, because actually I think without sounding or tooting our trumpets too loudly, I think these characters are like quite well drawn, quite relatable, and they're actually, just because they're British doesn't mean you don't understand how these humans feel. And I think that is the thing that actually translates more than, oh, they've got British accents and it's about British history, therefore no one seems to care. And I think that's actually a bit of a misnomer, as you said.
And it helps that all the characters are real. These are people who genuinely lived and died and did this thing. And I think that you can't help but cut through when you're watching a story that is about people who really did a real thing. And we really have tried to make sure that the essence of these real people come through, alongside all the silliness.
And like, I had no idea that Ian Fleming was part of it, even tangentially as it was. So it's like, it's just a really cool story, and I'm glad people are responding to it. All this to say,
yeah, the Fleming was one of the big questions where we were going, is this going to land? Like, because Bond, in some ways, you can kind of trick yourself into thinking that James Bond is such a British sort of part of culture, but obviously it's internationally renowned. And actually, he's going down a storm here. I'm
really is
the day as I play in Fleming, and people are clicking in, and then they're sort of just delighted that he's there. And he was a gift, when we realized he was sort of loosely involved in the actual real true story. We were like, well, we've got to throw Ian Fleming in there. You can't ignore Fleming. Come on.
If you got Bond, you need to use Bond.
Yeah. What, I guess, so when I saw it last February 2024, I know you guys were coming to sort of like the close of your runs on the West End. What has the break between doing the show 8 times a week and like finishing off and then starting it again, like what has that done for you guys as actors to like strengthen your characters, to strengthen your takes on the show?
I didn't have a break.
Yeah. So Claire, were you in it straight through, Claire, or did you stop?
Yeah, I got taken out. I would say I did have a month break, so I was quite lucky. I got Christmas.
I think what's interesting actually is that, well, I speak for myself, but I think we kind of turned our brains off mostly as particularly as performers from it, because you've done a year in the West End. The difficulty with doing a long running show is that it becomes autopilot, particularly a musical, especially ours, that has to be so precise or the entire thing falls apart.
Yeah.
You're in danger of becoming part of a machine, and it happens to you rather than kind of remembering to be present and remembering to kind of fully live in it every time you perform it. And, we'd done it, 400 times on the West End by the time we had that break. So I think actually what was more important for us was to kind of step away from, sorry, Claire, but step away from those performances and us as the writers, we could have a think about, the show and how it's kind of going to be produced and what theatre is going to be in, and oh my god, get behind all that exciting stuff. But I think creatively we needed a break from these people, and it's been really nice to then come back to them and rediscover them and go, this little bit, I remember this little bit, like this is great because you and me had this moment. And I think that's
alternatively, that bit that I used to do, actually, that's totally and utterly useless and pointless. And in fact, isn't part of the story. It doesn't need to happen. And it's just something that's kind of grown through a year of performing and coming back and kind of taking it back to square one and being like, actually, what is the truth of these characters in these moments? It's very rare you get to do that as an actor or a writer, and to do it. This is like the 6th iteration of Operation Mincemeat. So like we feel very lucky, and each time it feels ever kind of purifying it to its perfect essence, hopefully.
And also it means we can put in some extra treats. Like there's some extra treats in the set. There's like some little things that weren't there in the West End, because again, we could sort of go away, we come back with clear brains and go, oh, what if this moment had this thing? Or what if we put that in? So I feel like even if you have seen the show in London, you ain't seen it in New York. And like, we're very, very proud of, like, it feels like the final boss version of the show to us, doesn't it?
I was going to say, Claire, that must be the weirdest part for you, like with only the month off break. It must be like a deja vu just coming in and doing it in a different city with a slightly glitzier finale.
Do you know what was really nice, actually? Like, with the guys going and then actually having to do it with a completely different cast. Because I've been doing like the show with these guys for, I would say, like 5 years or something beforehand. So actually getting to discover the character with a completely different cast, discover new aspects of her, and then coming to a new city, and then back to these guys, and us rediscovering all of this together, but then kind of being the same original group has been a really lovely experience, actually. It's kind of like I've managed to have the best of both worlds of sort of like finding new worlds of Jean, but then kind of incorporating what I'd already learned and then going back to that.
That must be
That's a nice way of saying you've never stopped working in your time. And it's not the best of that both, Claire. You're mad. You went to a beach. You know that, right?
I went to my house at Christmas. I got to spend some time at home.
Jak, does Dear Bill kill as hard as it does here as it did in the West End?
Yeah, maybe more. You know, it's
Yeah, that's it more.
I can't see the audience. The way the spotlight is on me, it means the audience are completely gone to me. But I can hear the sniffles, the audible sobs and sniffles that go along with singing Dear Bill. And I always caught them in London, whereas in New York, I'm like, hey, I think there's more. I think they're more frequent. I think the applause is going on longer. Some people stand up after it, which is people weren't doing that in London at all.
Americans are more vocal in general.
Yeah.
And that plays into every aspect of their lives, particularly as an audience. Like if they find something funny, they will laugh quite loudly. And if they think you've done a good performance, they will make sure you know, and they will stop the show to let you know right at that moment. And that doesn't really happen in London ever.
People really want to show their appreciation of the craft of what they're seeing at the same time as in the story. It's like there's two audience brains happening simultaneously, where because people are so locked into musical theatre here, you know, it's kind of the capital of the world for musical theatre. People know their stuff. And I think people really want to go, I see what you've just done. As a performer, as a writer, I can see it. And I need to show you guys how much I love that, as well as I love the character and I'm connecting with this moment.
How are you finding the New York theater scene compared to the streets of the West End? It must be like really strange with Sunset Boulevard on the next block.
It's great. Like, honestly, the community is really lovely. Like we got sent to do a concert in Philadelphia to literally the day after we arrived. And we got to meet a whole bunch of other Broadway performers who were also performing at that. And they were honestly the nicest, friendliest, most excited people. They were like, we're so excited that your show is coming. And it's not that British people or the West End isn't like that. It's just you don't have that sense of everyone's come from other places to come to New York to live this dream, which you don't necessarily get in London. So I think everyone understands that being here was really quite a big thing for them, for you, and that the only community you can find or that is easy to create is the one of Broadway. And so immediately, suddenly everyone is friendly with you. They're like, oh, we're going past Straits, we're doing this. We're going to hang out at this place afterwards. And like that, there are places in London to hang out after the show, right, as much as are here. So like the community exists because it's all in the same 5 blocks. And then there's the bars that you go to. And so we feel so welcomed. It's a really lovely experience.
I think what's been really nice as well is because we've built this show so gradually over like 7-8 years. We've kind of really in small venues and kind of in the what we would say the trenches of kind of fringe theatre in the UK. And even when we arrived on the West End, we were largely unknown. You know, we had a kind of cool following that had really helped push the show. But in terms of the industry, it was endless conversations of going, so it's called Operation Mincemeat. And you would go, oh, okay, what's, sure, that sounds okay, sure. And what's been really lovely here is people have heard of it. People know what we're bringing. They've listened to the soundtrack, or they've kind of, you know, they've caught wind of it. And even from that first day when we met these other performers, there was a kind of sense of excitement that we were here, which is just the nicest possible welcome you can have when you're about to start a very grueling run, is feeling like people are behind you.
We talked about it yesterday, Zoe, like how up until this point, I feel like every single time we've stepped onto stage, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it always felt like we were going in to prove ourselves. Like even the West End, it felt like every night it was like, there was most of the people there had very generously been like, I've no idea what this is, but I'll give it a go. And that's an amazing thing to do. But, you know, and the price of that is we have to then be like, okay, don't worry, guys. I know you've taken a chance, but we're gonna, over the course of this 2.5 hours, prove to you that you did the right thing in making this crazy decision. Whereas it does feel a bit more like being here, the buy-in is already present. Like if you've made it to Broadway, something's happened in your show that's good. Like there's a reason that it's gotten here. And it feels a little bit more like we can breathe out slightly as performers and be a bit more like, let's tell you this story versus, please don't worry, we promise this will be good in the end.
The openness of the community has been such a surprise. That night when we met you on the rooftop, I was going to see The Roommate after that, and I ended up having martinis and Sardis with Patti LuPone that night. And that to me, I was like, Broadway, baby, like people are just willing to hear you out and get to know you. It was a marvelous thing. And we're having loads of weird moments like that already, where it's just like, oh, that's huge. And no one around me is acting like this is huge, but it is huge. It's really wonderful. It's a wonderful, exciting, open place. Not like London. Never going back.
I feel what we're doing is ragging on London.
It doesn't help that everything in London closes at 11 p.m. Like everything in London, it's almost impossible once you finish your show in London to be like, right, and now we'll all go and have a drink together. Like, because everyone has to live, you know, they're so far away. It's just a harder ask, I think. And it's not, you know, it's not to do with the people. It's just, it just in its very structure makes it more difficult to kind of have that team spirit, like we're all at the same school and we've gone to the dance and we'll go and have drinks after the thing, you know.
I think also there's an appreciation of how hard it is to do this job here in a way that doesn't necessarily, like people understand it's you know, you're to do 8 shows a week at this level is a hard ask of anyone, and that is kind of taken for granted. I feel a little bit in London. It's a bit like, yeah, well, you know, you're just dancing around and singing. It's not a real job, but it's not hard. Whereas here they're like, no, this is really, really difficult, and performers from around the world are trying to get to this place. And I think, as Tash was saying, like if a show has got to Broadway, it must have done something right at some level. And so if you are on Broadway, I think there's a slight understanding of you're probably working very hard to be here, and thank you very much. And that gratitude is really felt, and actually really, it makes your job easier because you're like, yeah, you see how hard this is, and that makes it feels like you're not being gaslit by your own audience in some way.
Have you run into Audra McDonald at your stage door yet?
She doesn't lose through the same door that we use.
Also, our timings are weird at the moment in that we start at 8 p.m. in previews, so we've not. I think
everything is so much later.
We're ships in the night, us and Audra right now.
Everything is so much later here. I was in London for the WhatsOnStage Awards at the beginning of the month, and like I saw a bunch of stuff, and it all started at 7:00, and it was great. And yeah, I'm excited for all of you. I have nothing to do with your show, but I'm like, I feel like through WhatsOnStage, I've followed you guys from New Diorama on, and I'm just so glad that you're getting the chance to do it here. And
it has to be said, we feel like WhatsOnStage do such an incredible job of like, we really needed them in that first run.
It does.
truly no one gave a crap who we were. And What's on Stage came along and they gave us a 5-star review. And I think it honestly galvanized not just like audiences, but other reviewers. And I think they just work so hard to kind of find little shows to do exactly what this show has done, which is like find the people, get the name out there, get audiences so we can go on that, they can, you know, help us go on that journey. So we're not being paid by What's on Stage to say this, but it really was so appreciated and really like encouraging for us as makers that people who knew about this stuff were like, no, keep going. Like you're onto a good thing here. And so, yeah. And also the people who listen to these podcasts, like all this, like people who are really keyed into stuff that's upcoming. We're just so grateful because without people who, you know, make it and listen to it, we literally would not have a show on Broadway's. And that's just incredible to us.
Have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.
Bye.
Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, rate, or just generally share the podcast with your friends. We will be back with new episodes next week. And if you have got a question for us, make sure you ping it to feedback@whatsonstage.com.